Hey, Soul Boom Generation, I've got a really exciting announcement for you. We've got a Substack. If you love the Soul Boom podcast and book and ideas, then you're going to want to get our weekly newsletter Substack sent to your inbox. It's magnificent. There's going to be fantastic guest authors. Some are written by me. A lot of them delve into the ideas around the podcasts that we're doing that week. So sign up, please subscribe. Go to soulboom.substack.com. Thank you.
We don't do meditations in our work, we don't pray, to have our prayers answered. We get up as if they already are. Like there's a kind of an absolute state. Why? Because when you feel a different emotion and you've regulated that emotional change, you won't need anything outside you. Like that, a person doesn't want to leave the familiar emotional state until there is crisis, and then they have to, right? So change your emotional state by thought alone. Why? Because if you have an event in your life that's traumatic, the stronger the emotion you feel from that trauma, the more altered you are inside of you, the more the brain freezes a frame and takes a snapshot, and that's called a long-term memory. So we remember the events in our life that have high emotional quotients, all right? And that emotion then that's connected to that past experience says, oh, all men are this way, money is the root of all evil, and my ex is this way, whatever. You draw a conclusion about that experience. So how are you going to change that biologically? You got to make a choice with a level of amplitude that's greater than the trauma.
Hey there, it's me, Rainn WIlson, and I want to dig into the human experience. I want to have conversations about a spiritual revolution. Let's get deep with our favorite thinkers, friends, and entertainers about life, meaning, and idiocy. Welcome to the Soul Boom Podcast. I didn't know you from Adam, Dr. Joe, and this has been an incredible odyssey for me to kind of dig deep in what you're doing in so many ways. I heard about you first from Maria Menounos, who's a huge fan, and been reading your book, listening to various podcasts, and it's really shifted a bunch of stuff inside me in some really positive ways. I'm just starting to scratch the surface on what you're digging into. One thing I wanted to say, and I wanted to share with you, because you know how we're all naturally skeptical until we have a personal experience, and that's part of the human nature. But I have two healing experiences I wanted to share with you,
Nice.
And I just wanted to get your thoughts on them as an expert in this field. One is I was going to, you know what network chiropractic is? Yeah, so it's a certain kind of chiropractic. It's not so much that it's more like energy
Information
fields.
and energy, yeah.
I was doing this network chiropractic, and I went into the guy's office, and then he touched me, and he for 90 seconds, and he's like, whoa, what's going on? And I was like, what? He's like, you are really in contact with something really toxic. There's something in your body, like you were in touch with some kind of toxins that are really bad. He's like, I got to work on this. I was like, I was like 23. I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. And then he was working on me some more. And then it hit me. 2 days previous, we were making a theater set, and we were using spray paint in an enclosed space. And we were spray painting all these props, and we were like coughing, and we'd go outside and we'd go back in and we'd spray paint because we didn't know. We were fucking stupid. And I remember that. And how the hell does a chiropractor with his thumbs on my neck recognize that all of a sudden my body is filled with toxins? I would never, if someone told me that story, I'd be like, oh yeah, sure that happened. But I swear to you, that's exactly how it went down.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think everything is energy and information, right? We're gravitationally organized light and information. I think the body's always emitting information. I think we know very little about the energetic patterns in the body, but energy and frequency carry information. So if he's in tune,
he picked that up.
I think it's not difficult to pick up. Yeah.
Wow. The other thing I will say is, because my uncle is a scientist and is a registered nurse and has a PhD, and he's very skeptical of anything that it can't be like proven with data, and he's very like anti-acupuncture. Okay, because he's like, there hasn't been a definitive data study that shows that acupuncture is effective.
There's no money that's being funded towards the research on
Well, that's true. But I used to have chronic lower back pain starting when I was around 17 years old. It would throw my back out 2 or 3 times a year where I'd just have to lay on the floor. And this happened from 17 until I was about 35. Once a year, twice a year. And I just knew for 2 days, I'm out and my real lower back is out. Someone recommended this acupuncturist, and I was covered by my Screen Actors Guild insurance.
Good insurance, by the way.
Great insurance, thank you. And I went to go see this guy. He's since passed away. Rubio was his name. He was amazing. And I did 4 sessions with him, and he did the needles, he did cupping, and then he did like electrical charge between the needles kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what happened. I was in a really bad place. It healed it. And ever since that point, I have not had one negative. I've never thrown my back out once after having it multiple times a year. It was like 5 sessions with this guy. I've been healed. I've had that personal experience. Again, if someone else told me that, I'd be like, oh, okay. But I've experienced it. So what happened there?
Well, again, once again, I mean, energy travels through the body and energy doesn't travel through the body. There are certain pathways that it travels. And when the connective tissue is liquid crystalline structure, and connective tissue is crystals, right? So when the body fixates into certain patterns, right, those patterns are causing energy to be blocked. So put in little conduits that enhance connectivity in terms of electricity, and you can redirect energy in the body and cause the body to change its memory, you know, or the pattern that's stuck in the body. It's subtle and powerful.
Yeah, yeah. I would say I'm grateful for those experiences because it opened my mind to the possibility that healing can come in many forms.
That's a really healthy way to look at it.
And I want to get back to the transcendent experience part of it because that's kind of my thing. I love transcendent experiences, and I feel like the spiritual path for anyone is filled with these kind of miraculous experiences of deep beauty, connection, and meaning. And that is, you know, gamma. You have in your book the charts of the gamma rays and not gamma. What is
waves?
It? Gamma waves. Gamma rays is from like a science fiction novel. What I'm intrigued with in learning about your work is how similar it is to so many spiritual practices that have been around for 2,000 or 3,000 years. And, you know, transcendental meditation does very similar stuff with brain waves. I've met with these Tibetan Buddhists recently up in Dharamshala, northern India, and the work that they do is so similar. So metacognition is the idea that you achieve in meditation that you're kind of larger than yourself. You're not just in the little habit trail of your thoughts. You're seeing them from a distance. And surrender to a consciousness greater than yourself, to Brahman, to God, to Gaia, however you want to view it. Then service to others, fostering those heart muscles that have to do with compassion and love and kindness and humility. Those can be practiced. That's in the Christian tradition, the Catholic mystic tradition. So many of these different spiritual paths are leading to the same thing, your science and your research and this step-by-step process that you teach. Are you shying away from that at all? How do you incorporate the kind of spiritual mystic elements to what you're doing?
I go to great measures in my work to not use anything language-wise in the realm of tradition or religion or spirituality because I really think it divides an audience. You say a word and the person has an experience.
You say soul and they've heard that in church and they're like, oh, fuck that.
Whatever. Yeah. Whatever that is, I think that that's language from 2,000 years ago. That's language from 5,000 years ago. That's not the contemporary language. So everybody's got their own meaning based on their own experience or what their wife believes or husband believes. You know, it's just weird.
Religious trauma, spiritual trauma.
So I don't like to use any of that language. I don't study any form of meditation. It's just not my thing. I see what works in terms of brain and heart function. I see what works from our data, and I think that that science is that contemporary language, and we use that language and covering some of the similarities, because when we look at our fMRI studies, it is definitely not mindfulness. It's definitely not mindfulness. Mindfulness looks completely different in terms of brain scans. But there's an element of mindfulness to get to that elegant state, right? You have to be present of your thoughts. You have to be aware of them. You can't take that exit because it's going to lead you to a lot of thinking. And you
have to notice your breath. You have to regulate your emotions.
You got to regulate your state. You got to keep working with the, laboring for the present moment. So there are, I think truth is truth, right? And I think we have a biology, and this biology is pretty consistent amongst the human species. And so I think there's some universality that's involved here. But I love the idea of renaming everything in a contemporary way that nobody's excluded. Like, I think science creates communities. So when we bring all those branches of science together, I love watching a 9-year-old kid that comes for a week-long event and goes through the entire week, does every meditation. I love when he's sitting next to an elder in their late 70s and they're talking quantum physics. I love that. In fact, we love that so much we did studies on that. And we discovered that we put a young person with an old person for 7 days, and they had to eat with them.
Oh, nice.
They had to do all their meditations with them. They had to share the information with them.
You mean like humans were doing for tens of thousands of years when our old people actually lived with our young people?
When the elders, were part of...
shared the cave?
Yeah, shared the cave. Part of the community. When we paired them together, we got so many people saying, I'm not going to make it with this old person. Can I get another person? And then the young one saying, oh my God, this person's stuffy and bitter. And bam. At the end of 7 days, best friends in the world. And when we looked at their brain scans, they had global alpha outperform anybody that we studied in terms of controls that went through the 7-day event. Their forebrains were in high gamma, which means they are very clear, very focused. And when they did cognition studies, we had them do cognition tests at 5 in the morning every morning. The young people and the old people.
You say cognition studies, you mean like just a test, some kind of test?
Tests on cognition, tests on memory, tests on streams of consciousness. They outperformed. The young person did way better, and the old person did way, way better as well.
Wow.
And pairing them together somehow had that effect. So
maybe there's an answer to the mental health crisis among youth somewhere in what you're talking about.
I think
some kind of mentorship connection program. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, we're looking at all of these things, but my point is that the community evolving collectively, is the cool part, and I never want to exclude anyone. I want to make it so that everybody understands it. I don't want to shut anybody's brain off so that they go, oh, that sounds a lot like... I want them to interpret it however they interpret it and find the value in it.
That makes sense. That makes total sense. You don't want to lose anybody at the get-go. What I'm trying to do in Soul Boom is show the universality of spiritual paths that can be open to everyone. You can be spiritual but not religious. You can have a vague sense of God. You can say that God is just the Dharma, just the kind of cosmic balance of the universe, but that, these spiritual tools are there, and they've been there for 3,000 years for our personal transformation, but also social transformation. Sure. And what was also amazing about the work that you do is community building, and you've talked a lot about the science about how people start to, their blood starts to, I don't know all the terminology, but they start to connect on some really deep, profound levels. And I believe this totally, that the answer to the world's problems, the mental health epidemic, everything is community. Loving community, working shoulder to shoulder in service. And that's what religion kind of used to give us, and now that's very fractured. Maybe you're talking about, I have a chapter in my book about building the perfect religion, but there is a faith aspect about that, the beauty of and harmony of community coming together and transforming.
No, I'm 100% behind you. I think I've been saying for quite some time now that the future is community.
Yeah.
And when COVID happened and we were running a lot of events and we went to a standstill, I realized the value of our community because, get 2,000 people together from 75 different countries around the world. It doesn't.
Do they stay in touch? Do they keep together? Yeah. And do they strive to find other community after those events? How do they sustain that community bond?
We do walking meditations. That's a strong part of getting good at practicing walking with your eyes open in your life. So we do, at our week-long retreats, we do at least 4 walking meditations.
Okay.
So you're going to embody that. You're going to practice with your eyes open so you can get good at it. It's going to become a habit. So there are a lot of communities in our community that do, like, I get pictures from The Hague, in Holland. I get pictures from South Africa, from Sydney, pictures from Mexico City, that people, they meet together and they do a walk together, right? They do
that's great.
And so they're on the beach, they're on the park, wherever they are, they're together and they're walking together.
That's beautiful.
The other thing that we have I'm super proud of is you get that emergent collective together. And I think that just like an infection can spread amongst the community and create disease, I think health and wellness can become as infectious as diseases. I don't know what exactly the difference is, but I do know there's an element of intention, that you have to have a clear intention, and you have to combine that clear intention with an elevated emotion. You got to get out of your resting state. You got to change your energetic emotional state. And somehow, whether it's, if you want to relate that to any type of spiritual healings that take place for people, I don't know, because I've never been. But when a collective group of people change their energy, we start seeing dramatic changes in people's biology. You cannot keep the same model, the same paradigm of reality. Yeah. On some level, we are connected by this invisible field of energy and information. So again, we're using the science to build the model. Once we understand the model, let's see if we can push the envelope. I would say that the majority of time, we've been really pleasantly surprised with the outcome. I think we are greater than we think. I think we're more powerful than we know. I think we're more unlimited.
But again, everything that you're talking about, the bones of everything that you're doing, is there through time, through so many different spiritual and faith traditions.
No, absolutely.
And that's great. And you're backing it up with science, but you're walking in parallel with ideas like the Holy Spirit and ideas like being in service to others. Ideas like God is love.
Right, exactly.
We had the comedian Neil Brennan on the show, and he was a diehard atheist, hardcore atheist, did ayahuasca, which I'm not recommending necessarily to our viewers, and experienced God to such a capacity, and he viewed it as not the source, but close, the cosmic force. He experienced the cosmic force, and now he's like, I know that there's a cosmic force. Yeah. I love hearing how kind of everything you're doing is like these little pieces of like, oh, here's a little bit of the Bible, here's a little bit of Tibetan Buddhism, here's a little bit of, laying on hands, old-fashioned prayer gathering.
And it's kind of crazy because we were just doing an event in Dallas just this past weekend. I was walking to the walking meditation, so I could observe it. And this guy he's like, hey, I'm here. I'm a Christian, but man, I tell you, this is really working for me in my life. Like, what am I going to say? I'm going to say, great. Like, I don't care. I really don't care. You get to be whoever you want, but maybe these are universal principles once discovered.
That's exactly what
if you're an atheist, or if you're whatever, and you have no experience of that universal force, that invisible field of energy that has an intelligence that exists beyond our senses, if you're unaware of it, it doesn't exist for you. So you will be a materialist. But have one experience, have one arousal, one brainstorm, one moment of connection, one illumination.
Which you don't need drugs to do.
You don't need drugs to do. I mean, our fMRI studies show, without a doubt, that first of all, if you don't expect anything, the unexpected will happen. That's number one, we can say for sure. Okay. Number two is when you have a mystical transcendental experience, according to our fMRIs, you'll look like you're on psilocybin. You will look like you are on a... So
you can achieve those states, and you don't need a chemical to be put into your body.
Look, we were looking at 63 different diseases. 63 different diseases. And we were seeing that in all 63 diseases at the end of 7 days, there was a dramatic change in fatigue and pain levels, independent if you had cancer, tinnitus, PTSD, anxiety, didn't matter. That at the end of 7 days, whatever your health condition was, with one intervention, there was a dramatic change in fatigue and dramatic change in pain levels. So we did a study where we isolated the blood plasma of these meditators at the end of 7 days. And 100% of the people at the end of 7 days had a dramatic increase in endogenous opiates. What is that? Those are the very natural pain relievers that make you feel euphoria and diminish pain. We had one particular family of endogenous opiates called dynorphins. The concentration in the plasma of those advanced meditators was so great, we had to dilute the substance to be able to measure it. I mean, it was just that concentrated. So the person's making their own pharmacy of anti-pain relievers. They're making their own pharmacy.
We can all make our own pharmacies.
Own pharmacy of antidepressants, own pharmacy of immune function that suppresses COVID, their own pharmacy of natural immune function or anti-carcinogenic chemicals. The body, the innate intelligence of the body can actually do it. And we've just done studies on intention. Put an intention to do it, and we actually see 100% of the people do it. Like anybody, you could eat meat, not eat meat. You could believe in Jesus, not believe in Jesus. You could be, you could be wealthy, you could be
obese,
poor, sick,
or fit.
Doesn't matter. Nobody's so special to be excluded. So again, why is the data so important? Why is all of this important? Because I think people innately know this to be the truth. I think we innately know it. I think we just forgot it, right? And so what happens when none of the conventional or unconventional therapies are working for a person and they have a cancer or whatever, and they're left with this, and the only belief that they have is in themselves. And you can't believe in yourself without believing in possibility. And you can't believe in possibility without believing in yourself. And now the belief that they could heal has to be installed. And many people, I interview them backstage. I say, why did you do your meditations 3 times a day? And they said, I was not doing my meditations 3 times a day to heal. I just started disbelieving again. I started doubting. And I had to get back and change my state and start believing again. And I think if you keep doing that, you believe, you behave, you become. I think that's kind of how it works.
That's good. Let me repeat that. Believe, behave, become. I like that. Because all of this that you're talking about is starting with the thought. It's just starting with a single thought. And maybe a volition, a will to say, I want to change, and then I change my thinking, and then it changes a feeling, and then that changes an autonomic response, and then I bring the meditation into my daily life. And
it's practical. Super practical.
But it starts with such a specific, doable little thing, and then all of these miraculous healings and changes you're talking about, they're really just starting with some self-belief thoughts, some really simple things.
It's an experiment. It's an experiment. If I change, will my life change? That's really the experiment. And as I said earlier, anybody who has a change, a really fundamental change, they've really changed, they will see life differently. They will no longer become conscious of the same things.
The healing stuff aside, putting all that aside, and that's great and important and wonderful.
Small part of our work, by the way.
But changing lives through changing self-belief can be profound. Now, I have a friend named Maynard, and he really, really struggles with procrastination. He's got his own business. It's pretty successful. It's pretty stressful. A lot is on his shoulders. He really struggles with procrastination every day, and he spends way too much time on his phone, thumbing through Instagram and doing fantasy football and playing little games, and he knows he's doing it wrong, and he really wants to put more focus on his, like he won't even he'll procrastinate even just sending out an invoice to get paid. So he won't get paid because he'll procrastinate that. And he's really stuck around this, and I've been trying to just help him, offer some perspective. We talk, we pray together. So for Maynard, what do you got for my friend Maynard?
Yeah, well, I think an addiction is something that you think you can't stop, or knowing something is not good for you.
Right.
And you do it anyway.
Okay.
So
how is that an addiction?
Well, like you could know alcohol is not good for you. You can know that video gaming is not good for you. Isn't the scrolling is not good.
Porn.
And none of that's good for you, but you can't. You do it anyway. You know it, but you rationalize, I'm going to keep making the same choice. Well, crossing the river of change from the old self to the new self, the moment you decide to not procrastinate, the moment you decide to not scroll, the moment you decide to not whatever.
And sometimes it takes hitting bottom to get to the place where you're be like, fine, I'll fucking do it. I'll do anything to get out of this.
Because you may lose a relationship. You may lose,
you get fired.
You lose your health. You lose your job. That's when people, when they're in crisis, that's the moment they could actually see themselves for the first time, because nothing's making this feeling go away.
But you don't have to hit bottom to make the change.
That's my message. My message is, why wait for that, right? You can learn and change in a state of pain and suffering. You can learn and change in a state of joy and inspiration. The only reason that you actually change at that point is because the moment you no longer feel like yourself, you create metacognition. Like when you're inside the jar, you can't read the label. Now you can go, oh, what a jerk I was. Like, oh my God, what a waste of time. Oh, how mean was I? Oh my God, I was only hurting myself. Judging that person. Oh my God, the amount of anger I felt was killing me. Like, I don't want to do that any longer. So for a person who truly wants to change, just know that the moment you decide to make a different choice, it's going to feel uncomfortable. And the hardest part about change is not making the same choice as you did the day before. And the moment you do that, you're leaving the known and you're stepping into the unknown. And now the brain gets really disturbed by that, because it's an anticipation machine. It likes to predict the next moment, right? So then the moment the person gets uncomfortable, the body, which has been conditioned chemically, says, whoa, 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 wait a second, I'm the mind, not you. And the body starts sending thoughts to the brain like, oh, come on, start tomorrow. And you believe in that thought, you make the same choice, you do the same thing, you create the same experience, you feel the same feeling, and you're back to the known again, and the person's gone nowhere. So what we discovered is, going from the old self to the new self, that your body literally is a community of 70 trillion cells that's spying on your brain. That's basically what it is. And if you were to sit there right now, Rainn, and I said to you, I want you to fake standing up 10 times, but one time I want you to stand up. And we were measuring orthostatic pressure, or blood volume, blood pressure. Before you even made the conscious choice of when it was, your body already knew, because it's got to squirt out a certain amount of adrenaline to keep the same volume of blood going to your brain. So your body's very precognitive. Okay, so what does that have to do with your friend? Everything, because most people are sitting on the couch with the remote control, the big screen TV, they got their iPad on their lap or their tablet, they got their phone over here, they got their computer over here, they got their beer and their peanuts here, and they go, I think I'm going to change tomorrow. Now, the body is the servant to the mind. That kind of decision has no effect on the body. That thought never makes it past the brainstem. It's theoretical, it's hypothetical, right? But what we discovered is, when a person makes a decision to change with such firm intention that the amplitude of that choice carries a level of energy that causes their body to respond to their mind, that the choice that they make in that moment becomes an experience in time that they will never forget.
Wow.
They will say to you, Rainn, I knew exactly where I was, the time of day it was, what I was doing when I made up my mind to change. And the stronger the emotion you feel when you make up your mind to change, the more you remember the choice. You're branding that choice neurologically in your brain, and that's giving your body a taste, a sampling of the future emotionally. And that kind of aligns the body to that feeling. Now, the person who searches for that same intensity every day will change. See, we don't do meditations in our work, we don't pray, to have our prayers answered. We get up as if they already are. Like there's a kind of an absolute state. Why? Because when you feel a different emotion and you've regulated that emotional change, you won't need anything outside you. Like that, a person doesn't want to leave the familiar emotional state until there is crisis, and then they have to, right? So change your emotional state by thought alone. Why? Because if you have an event in your life that's traumatic, the stronger the emotion you feel from that trauma, the more altered you are inside of you, the more the brain freezes a frame and takes a snapshot, and that's called a long-term memory. So we remember the events in our life that have high emotional quotients, all right? And that emotion then that's connected to that past experience says, oh, all men are this way, money is the root of all evil, and my ex is this way, whatever. You draw a conclusion about that experience. So how are you going to change that biologically? You got to make a choice with a level of amplitude that's greater than the trauma, greater than the betrayal, greater than the past event. Your body's got to come out of its resting state, and that moment has to define you. In other words, you got to create a long-term memory by thought alone. And so most people never come out of their resting state until there's crisis, right?
Yeah.
Until there's breakdown, right? Until there's diagnosis. And so then we teach people actually, okay, you got to come out of your resting state. And
like
you got
if Maynard went bankrupt and his wife left him or something like that,
He
he'd
would
be
be
like,
like, oh my-
well, okay, I'm really now I've got to change
like
this
now-
procrastination
right.
now, and I'm going to take this snapshot and I remember this moment.
Yeah. And it's got to be that intensity, right? There's a strong contingency that is around this kind of concept of coming out of your resting state. And that's what the walking meditations are about. It's like, it's for you to get practicing with your eyes open. We practice relax in our heart and awaken the brain with our eyes open. Let's do that. Why? Because you want to be that way all day. And so you'll close your eyes, you'll get in that state, you'll open your eyes, you'll walk. You close your eyes again, you reboot. Get there again, you open your eyes, you walk again. You keep doing that enough times, that becomes the habit, right? So we use it in that way.
Yeah, that's cool. It's given me a lot of food for thought, and hopefully, Maynard, food for thought for you as well.
Hey everybody, it's me, Rainn. I want to share something with you. I have gone through periods of my life where I have felt a little bit lost in the chaos, in the anxiety. I often am searching for some clarity. So I want to share something really special. It's an app called Waking Up. This is founded by the great Sam Harris. You've heard of Sam Harris. He's also a neuroscientist. And Waking Up is an incredible arsenal, is the best way to describe it, of mindfulness, meditation, so many resources for mental health, all grounded in secular techniques, and it has approaches baked into it that actually work. There's so many different tools for my spiritual toolbox, and I really can't recommend it more highly. Soul Boom listeners can get their first month for free, plus you'll save $30 on the in-app price. If you go to wakingup.com/soulboom, you can start your free month today. That's wakingup.com/soulboom to get a free month plus $30 off.
This documentary. Source. When I hear the title, before we get into the meat of the documentary, I hear the title Source. What does that mean? Because that obviously has some resonance, just the title itself. What is Source?
Yes, so the documentary, in a sense, kind of named itself. Because, and by the way, I have nothing to do with the documentary other than the fact that I was interviewed and it's based on my work. The documentary was funded by a nonprofit called Inner Science, and they partner with us because we're interested in demystifying that kind of transcendental moment that people have. And so during the course of the documentary, you saw it, we have evidence-based science that we're demystifying, the understanding of what it is to change. And then we have human testimony. And you know better than anybody, there's nothing like a good story.
Sure.
Because that story really is the example of truth, right? And so somewhere along the line in our journey, we started seeing people stand on the stage with all kinds of chronic health conditions, stage 4 cancers, lupus, ALS, Parkinson's, I can go on. And their story of transformation was actually, they were speaking the truth, right? And so in the documentary, you have evidence in science and you have evidence in testimony, and evidence is the loudest voice. In every instance where I'll talk about this in a minute, but these people had a transcendental moment, a moment of connection. And there's an enormous amount of energy that's released in the brain. We've seen it over and over again. When we asked those people, because nobody named it, it kind of named itself. What do you think it is? Like, what is that you had this moment where you felt a level of love that is ineffable? It transcends the circuitry in your brain that you use based on knowns in your life. This is a whole unknown experience. And this kind of arousal is a very strong sympathetic response in the body, but the arousal isn't fear, the arousal isn't pain, the arousal is an anger or aggression, which is a typical way we experience arousal sympathetically. The arousal is kind of ecstasy. The arousal is bliss. They have a moment where they connect to something bigger than them. And we said to them, well, the producer said, what is it? And in every case, they're like, it's, I don't know what you want to call it. It's source. It's this light, that transcends matter. There's no separation. It's connection. It's wholeness. And everything material and everything physical is coming from this source. And so everybody kind of had their own way of saying it. So we named it that because that is a great explanation. Because once there's that kind of interaction that takes place with this invisible field of energy, and I don't want to get too esoteric up front, but our data shows that the brain goes into these super, super high coherent gamma brainwave states. And gamma is super consciousness, but it's not a little gamma. It's hundreds of standard deviations outside of normal. It's an enormous amount of energy in the brain. What happens at the effect of that is there's some dramatic change in the person's biology. And for some people, there's an instantaneous upgrade in their health. Like, there's the Parkinson's and now it's gone. There's the stage 4 cancer and now it's gone.
And you see that happening over the course of a documented week from one of your meditation retreats. But I'm sure you've seen it in so many different circumstances.
It's not uncommon that we see those kind of changes taking place at the end of a 7-day event. And that's kind of what prompted me really to investigate, because we have to demystify that process. Something is going on inside the brain and body of a person who gets a biological upgrade where they have MS and they're in a wheelchair, and then they're not in a wheelchair any longer. And what happened to them inwardly? And that's what our studies have been about, to really look to see what's happening in the brain, what's happening in the bloodstream, what's happening in the heart, what's happening in the immune system, what's happening in the microbiome, what's happening. We've measured just about in breast milk, we've measured in urine, we've measured everything.
So there might be a lot of people listening right now who are like, this is a little too new age for me, or this is too woo-woo for me, or something like that. But one of the things I really appreciated about the documentary and the work I understand that you've been doing since the documentary is you bring to bear hard, data-driven science backing up the work you're doing in healing. And the doc starts to dig into this under the surface there. But let's get to the data of it all. The doc gets into some really nitty-gritty stuff. Can you slowly walk us through that kind of this research driven healing that you're doing?
Sure. We partnered with the University of California, San Diego in one of the research departments, and we work really with empirical scientists to really demystify this process. And when I started out on the journey, I never thought I would be discovering the things that I've discovered, or we've discovered collectively. And we started teaching, like, in the very beginning, how do we change? Why is change so hard? And is there a formula or a way that you can teach people how to change? And so,
and you're not talking necessarily about transformational healing.
No.
You're just talking about changing thoughts, habits, behaviors, etc. And that's where you started with your first
because
book.
I mean, your personality creates your personal reality. We could all agree that if you change, whether you're break some type of substance addiction or you change in some way, the moment you make a change, your world changes. It's no longer the same life, and somehow it's different. And if your personality creates your personal reality, and your personality is made up of how you think, how you act, and how you feel, and if 90% of people's thoughts are the same thoughts as the day before, The same thoughts lead to the same choices lead to the same behaviors, the same behaviors create the same experiences produce the same feelings and emotions, you get used to those same feelings and familiar emotions, and they start influencing our very same thoughts. It makes sense then that our biology or neurocircuitry or neurochemistry, our hormones or gene expression will stay the same because pretty much we're the same.
Yeah.
Okay, keep that up for a period of time, and nerve cells that fire together, wire together, the personality becomes a set of hardwired beliefs, attitudes, perceptions, unconscious habits and behaviors, and automatic emotional responses. It's 95% of who we are by the time we're in the middle of our lives. That's memorized, right? It's conditioned. It's habituated. Okay, so then we thought, in looking at the studies in spontaneous remissions, one of the key elements is they broke the habit of being themselves. That was the thing they did. They changed. They broke the habit of the 95% of the unconscious state of mind and body, and they reinvented a new self and literally started to say, I'm not going to think that way any longer.
Right.
I'm not going to act this way any longer. I'm not going to feel this way any longer.
Right.
And that takes an enormous amount of energy and an enormous amount of awareness to not default and go unconscious, right? Okay, that's the process of change. How many times do we have to forget and go unconscious till we stop forgetting and start remembering? That's the moment of change. How many times do we have to go unconscious till we stop going unconscious to the thought, I can't, it's too hard, I'll never change, no one loves me.
Can I say something about that? Because, I mean, there's so many questions I want to ask, and you're on a roll. I don't want to break it up. But as an addict, as someone who, has struggled with drugs and alcohol in the past, this, in the book, in the doc, this resonated with me so deeply because that's what the 12-step program does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's like I'm habituated into thinking I'm an anxious person who's disconnected and that I need these things to feel connected and to soothe my anxiety, and I rely on them.
Right, right. And another way to say that really simply is we've been hypnotized and conditioned into using something outside of us to change how we feel inside of us. And so the more unhealthy we feel inside of us, the more lack, the more emptiness, the more pain, the more suffering, the more we're looking for someone or something or, some substance to change how we feel.
Or another person or money or
whatever it is.
A change in job situation.
And the moment you feel that change in your internal state, your brain remembers what causes that. Now you start becoming conditioned into relying on something outside of you. Nobody told us that we could actually regulate and change our emotional states. And this is what I discovered in looking at spontaneous remissions. They said, okay, I can't be this person any longer. And even if I only have 6 months to live, I'm just gonna live the way I want to live. Right. Or no drug, no chemo, no radiation, no surgeries, no drug trials, no diets. We're changing their biology because they were staying the same, and nothing changes in our life until we change, right? So crossing that river of change from the old self to the new self is a lot of discomfort. It's a lot of uncertainty. It's the unknown. And yet what they did really well was they started saying, well, if a belief is just a thought I keep thinking over and over again until I hardwired in my brain, what do I want to believe about my future and about myself? What thoughts do I want to fire and wire in my brain? And then they started really thinking about how they were going to act with their spouse, with their children, with their ex, with their coworkers, when they're alone. I can't be this person and behave this way. Let me rehearse in my mind how I'm going to be in my life. And the act of closing their eyes and mentally rehearsing, the brain doesn't know the difference between what you're imagining and the real life experience. You could actually prime the brain by installing circuitry to look like you've already done it. Now that's important because the brain looks like you've already experienced it. Now you've got circuits primed in place.
And you talk about this a lot, the mental rehearsal, and I really responded to that as an actor, because an actor, especially in the theater, you go through like, here's my blocking and how I'm going to say it, and you've rehearsed it, you've gotten those behavior patterns down. I was thinking about the guys in the luges, at the Olympics, and they picture, you can see them like, I'm going to go down here. Like, why don't we do that more in our life? Like when I go into work, here's how I'm going to manifest this change.
So to answer your original question, you're demystifying something that could be somewhat spiritual, like you're visualizing, but I never use that word. Whether you're an actor, a musician, a dancer, an athlete, everybody does it. You're always rehearsing your next move. And
in here.
Mentally, right? And there's been tons of research that shows that you take a person and you have them do something like play the piano, and you do a brain scan before and after, you see changes. Have someone mentally rehearse and play the scales and chords. It looks like they've been playing for 5 days. They never lifted a finger. The brain doesn't know the difference. So put that person in front of a piano and they just play like they've never played before because they've installed the circuitry. So why not use that and say, okay, I can't behave this way, but how am I going to behave? What am I going to do differently in my life? Let me think about that. And you can change the brain by thinking, okay, here's the hard part. Can I trade my suffering, my guilt, my unworthiness, my fear, my anger, my resentment? These emotions are just records of the past chemically. They're keeping me connected to the memory of the past. Okay, well, if I was actually healthy, or if I only had 6 months to live, and I wanted to live and make myself happy, I'd have to stop complaining. I'd have to stop blaming. I'd have to stop making excuses. I'd have to stop feeling this way. How do I want to feel? Can I teach my body emotionally how I will feel in that future before it happens? Now, this goes completely against how we've been programmed, right? So then you would have to allow your body to feel the elevated emotion before the experience. And the cool part about that is the body is so objective that it does not know the difference between the real life experience that's creating that emotion and the emotion that person is fabricating by thought alone. The body's believing it's living in a new future. The stronger the emotion you feel when you do that, the more you remember the image in your mind, and you're remembering your future, and you're changing your biology. Why? So this is what we discovered. If the person's in a meditation and they can sustain that state for an extended period of time, epigenetics says the environment signals the gene. Okay. The end product of an experience in the environment is an emotion. So if I'm feeling the emotion before the environmental experience, I'm signaling the gene ahead of the environment, and genes make proteins. And proteins are responsible for the structure and function of your body, and the expression of proteins is the expression of life. So could you upregulate the gene for health and downregulate the gene for MS? And we started seeing people stepping out of wheelchairs and having dramatic changes in their health. And this was in 2010, right? And I have to tell you, I was more surprised than anybody because
that's not what you went into it to do.
Yeah, like I thought, okay, you can change and your life could change, but I didn't really expect this kind of dramatic change in a person's health. And so then the word meditation literally means to become familiar with. What does that mean? It was an old ancient symbol, familiarization. Become so familiar with your unconscious thoughts. Become so aware of your automatic habits and behaviors. Become so conscious of your unconscious emotional responses. Become so familiar with that state of mind and body that you know thyself. Okay, now I'm not going to default back to the old self. Okay, what thoughts do I want to fire and wire in my brain? Give me some knowledge, give me some information, give me something new. And we use science as that language to demystify the process: quantum physics, neuroscience, neuroendocrinology, psychoneuroimmunology, epigenetics, electromagnetism, Newtonian physics. Make it non-intimidating, leave nothing to conjecture, to superstition, to dogma. Okay, now I can actually believe that this could actually occur. Okay, let me fire and wire this thought. Let me become familiar with it. Nerve cells that fire together, wire together. Sooner or later, that'll be the voice in my head instead of this one. Okay, how do I want to behave? Let's install the hardware. Let's do it enough times that it becomes a software program that I automatically behave that way. And if I keep feeling the emotion of my future, I could become familiar with a new emotion that's different than the old emotion. And we demystify the process of change. And then we started seeing those dramatic changes taking place in people's health, right? And so people do the work, the meditations in our community. They don't meditate to heal. They meditate to change. And when they change, they heal. Because so many times people stand on the stage in events and they say, I'm just not that person any longer. That's the old self.
Right.
The disease exists in that unhappy, unworthy, insecure, out of balance person. That's not me any longer. I'm someone else. They have a sense of temporality. Like, this is me and that is the old me. And we have language. We have a language specialist that studies the language of transformation. And I just spoke with him just last month. And our data shows that's exactly what happens. The person has a sense of temporality where they go, that person is different than this person. The disease exists in that other person. So that started our journey in the research. When I saw people step out of their wheelchairs back in 2010, I said, we got to start measuring. So I assembled a team of scientists and researchers, and we did quantitative brain scans, pre and post brain scans. Like, let's check your brain before the event, get people to learn new information, make new choices, do new things, create new experiences, feel new emotions. Will their biology change? Will their brains change? And then measure their brains at the end of 4.5 days. This is when we were doing 4.5-day events. And then why not demystify the actual process of change? And let's do some real-time brain scans. Like, while you're in a meditation, let's watch what's going on to be able to see what's working and what's not working. Am I saying certain words? Is it the music? Is it the timing? What do we know when people change the way they focus on things? And so we started on this journey, and we never thought we would see the kind of changes that we saw in the very initial studies at the end of a 4.5-day event. I can tell you without a doubt, you can make your brain work better in 4 days. And we saw people with severe anxiety, a severe depression, brain injuries, Parkinson's disease. So dramatic changes in their brain. And so now a subjective experience that the person is having is becoming quantitatively objectified. Like, we can't say to them, you're making that up. We can say, you have a different brain than the brain of the person that arrived. And then when we were looking at these real-time scans, what we started out seeing in the very beginning is that when we live by the hormones of stress, and stress is living in survival, and when you're trying to control and predict everything in your life, and you have the ongoing perception that things are going to get worse, so you pick the worst case scenario in your mind, and you begin to emotionally embrace that experience ahead of the event, you're kind of knocking your brain and body out of balance by thought alone. And when the brain and body are out of homeostasis and balance, that's what stress is. We try to control and protect everything in our life. And so every person, every object, everything, your cell phone, your car, your home, your computer, all the people in your life, your wife, your kids, your brothers, your sisters, your in-laws, your friends, you have a neurological network for every object, every person, every aspect of your body, every place you've lived, been to, sleep, work, wherever, is mapped neurologically in the brain. So when we start to control everything in our life, or try to predict everything in our life, we shift our attention from one person to another meeting, to another place, to another thing, to another memory. Like a lightning storm in the clouds, the brain goes into a very highly aroused state because there's a danger. And it starts firing incoherently.
I'll tell you exactly how that works for me. That happened to me this morning, okay? Which is my neural network having to do with like showbiz. Like when I get up in the morning and I'm relaxing, I'm outside, there's like hummingbirds, and I do usually, this morning I didn't have time, but usually a morning meditation and prayer. But then I look at the entertainment news, right? And I have like you said, a neural network.
Deep circuitry.
Deep circuitry of me being in show business.
That's your identity. That's your personality.
Yeah, it's a big part of my identity. And so I start reading about like, this is casting, this got greenlit, this didn't, this got canceled, this thing is going bankrupt. And my neurons start firing with like, and I get a lot of feeling states of like resentment, like, oh, that guy's a jerk, or I hope that works out, or I hope that one fails. And I'm in it. I'm in this kind of like roller coaster, and I can feel like the endorphins, the chemicals, and you know, electricity. And I had to just put it down, just like, oh my God, just who cares? Let it go.
And I think so the psychological model says that most people spend 70% of their waking day in that state of stress and in that state of survival. And if stress is when your brain and body are knocked out of homeostasis. You're out of balance in that moment. And the emotions that are derived from the stress hormones are anger, the frustration, resentment, hatred, judgment,
fear,
control, fear, anxiety, worry, insecurity, unworthiness, guilt, shame.
Oh, I know all those emotions so well, Dr. Joe.
You get the idea. People spend the majority of their time living by those states of the stress hormones, and psychology calls those normal human states of consciousness. Those are altered states of consciousness because that's not when you're at your best, right?
At my best. Yeah.
So what we discovered is that when the brain is in that what we call high beta brainwave state, that's a very high frequency in the brain, and your brain is over aroused, and so as you try to control and predict everything, and you're shifting your attention to all of the different elements in your life, the brain starts firing incoherently. Different compartments of the brain are firing out of order, and when the brain is incoherent, we're incoherent. And so we discovered that people get really over-focused, like when they're in the state. They obsess, they over-focus on things, and it's the very act of over-focusing on their problems and analyzing the problem or their life within the disturbing emotion.
Right.
100% of the time.
Oh my God, I relate to that so much.
100% of the time it makes the brain worse. 100% of the time because you're knocking your brain out of balance just by thought alone, right?
Yeah.
So this kind of narrow focus that takes place when we're under stress, that's because we need to pay attention, right? But we narrow our focus and we're over-focused. So in the early days, we discovered that if you taught a person to go from what's called the convergent focus and narrow focus, focusing on something physical and material, that's what we do when we're under stress. You narrow your focus on the danger. Is it around the corner? Is it behind the rock? Is it over there? We narrow our focus on the cause. It heightens our senses, right? So stress hormones do that, and we become materialists, right? And so we're always trying to anticipate the next moment. So we discovered that if you teach a person how to broaden their focus and do what's called a divergent focus, and stop this and do that. And I know this is hard to explain, but sense nothing, sense space. The act of sensing.
That's the old Buddhist thing of the empty mind.
Empty mind.
Yeah.
And so when you're sensing and you're feeling, you can't analyze, you can't think.
Right.
So when people do this, we started seeing their brain waves.
And meditation is the tool that you help them to leverage that state.
Right. But again, I don't do any traditional meditation. I don't do any religious meditation. I don't do any spiritual meditation. We just look at the data. And we just know that this works, right? So the act of focusing on nothing, and nothing physical, nothing material, and sensing space, we discovered if a person stayed with it for a period of time, because they're in the habit of doing this and they gotta regulate for a few days. But if they did it properly and they started sensing space, they would move from these high beta brainwave states into these slower states.
Right.
And as they slowed down from high beta to mid-range beta to low-level beta, they started moving into these states of alpha. And now alpha is the imaginary state. Alpha is the creative state. Alpha, your brain sees in pictures, it sees in images. In beta and high beta, the voice, the critic in your head is telling you how to think, telling you how to act, telling you what to do, right? So that default system kind of shuts off in the brain. We have data to show this. And the brain, all of a sudden, it starts diminishing its modularity, its compartmentalization. Our fMRI studies show this over and over again, that the different compartments of the brain that were once firing out of order start to synchronize. And what syncs in the brain links in the brain. So you see the slowing down out of the aroused state, you move into a more imaginary state, the person's inner world starts becoming more real than their outer world. Not only alpha, but now all of a sudden those different compartments of the brain start firing in unison, and there's just kind of the whole brain state that starts to take place, and the person starts feeling more like themselves than they had in a long time. Now, we started seeing that when a person's heart was in a state of coherence, in a state of order, energy built in the heart, just like the brain. And when the drum of the heartbeat started getting very rhythmic, it was like striking a great drum, the heart would all of a sudden inform the brain, the trauma's over. It would literally reset the baseline for trauma and tell the brain it was time to create. And like grabbing a big sheet and going like this, Rainn, the heart would inform the brain that it was time to create. It's the creative center. And the brain would go into these beautiful, elegant alpha patterns. So we started going, okay, can we teach a person to get more relaxed in their heart and awaken their brain? And we discovered the more relaxed they could get in their heart, like a springboard, there would be energy driven right to the brain, like an enormous amount of energy to the brain. And the more relaxed the person got into their heart.
And you can train your heart to get more relaxed, so to speak.
Oh, yeah, I can say that with absolute confidence. Yeah, it's a skill. It's just like complaining. You get good at it if you do it enough times, right?
Okay.
Okay, so then that becomes the platform for them to think differently. And new thoughts make new chemicals. Okay, now I got the theory. I got the philosophy, I got the knowledge, I got the information. Okay, what am I going to do with this now? Can I make a different choice than I typically make and apply it, personalize it, demonstrate, do something with it? If I can get my behaviors to match my intentions, get my actions equal to my thoughts, like my mind and body working together, I should have a new experience. Experience enriches the circuitry in the brain. That's exactly what it does. That's what experience does. But the end product of an experience is called an emotion. So from the experience in the work and in change, when you feel the emotion of the breakthrough and you feel a love for life, a joy for existence, grateful for the moment, that experience then, the chemistry from the emotion is teaching the body chemically to understand what the mind is intellectually understood. Now the information is no longer in the brain, in the mind. Now the information's in the body. You're embodying the truth now, and it's visceral. You feel it. It's that process that begins to change gene expression because it's new information, right? And so then do it over and over again. Their blood metabolism looks completely different. They're regulating thousands of new factors that were not present.
It's really mind-boggling. You change your thoughts, and then that changes your patterns and habits. That changes this, that reduces your kind of being in that fight, flight, stress response. That changes your emotion, and then your emotion signals to your neurochemicals and your biology that things are okay. It creates a healing state. Then when you add on top of that, the meditation experience.
The meditation experience is actually to get you there.
Okay.
Then your job is to get so good at doing it with your eyes closed.
Yeah.
You got to do it with your eyes open. Like you got to now get up and you got to take it for a test drive. And you got to be greater than the habits and the emotions of your body. You got to be greater than all the conditions in your environment. And you got to be able to sustain it for a certain period of time. In other words, you can't do an hour great meditation and say, oh my God, I feel so grateful. I feel so much love. My heart is so open.
And then go back into
and get up, and the next 16 hours of your day, you're flipping people off on the freeway. You're judging and the person wonders why I haven't healed. Well, weigh 1 hour of regulation against 16 hours of you being out of balance. So
that's a missing step just for me. Forgive me, just as Dr. Joe for Dummies. How do you get that? Because I've seen the people in the documentary doing your meditations. I've heard some of your meditations. How do you get that working in your life? You're driving down the 101 freeway. How do I actualize that?
Well, first of all, so I love the question because I think it's really important. But I'll use an example of someone who's struggling with, and we've seen hundreds of people with stage 4 cancer. That I know that sounds kind of crazy, and I don't want to give anybody false hope, but it's the side effect of when a person changes. We've seen so many people heal from cancer, and many of them. They start off on the journey and they notice that when they do the work, they start sleeping better at night. They start getting an appetite back. They have more energy. Their pain levels go down. They notice changes, but the cancer is still, in their body, and it's still in their bones. It's still in their organs. It's spreading. So they start doing the work. They start doing the meditations. Okay. I got to be able to do this with my eyes open. Like I got to be able to start practicing with my eyes open. So now becomes really important, because if they're going to react to their ex or to
their boss,
or their one of their friends, and they start getting angry or start getting resentful, whoops. you're back to the same emotional state, and that emotion is going to cause you to behave as if you're in your past, and it's going to influence you to think in the past, right? So they default, and they go back to the old personality, and they know that's why they're not healing. They're not saying meditation, I'm not healing. They're saying, what is it about me that I have to get really good at doing? So now when I get with my ex, or now when I get with my boss, let me rehearse what would love do. What would greatness look like? Okay, well, I don't know. We'll go read a book and find somebody who's great, that just was unlimited, whoever that was. Get some information in there. What would love do? And really start rehearsing what you're going to do in that circumstance. Okay, you get in the same circumstance, you don't knee-jerk, you don't emotionally respond the same way, and now all of a sudden that's a victory, right? And not only are you healing your body in that moment, but now your response to that person will never be the same. It's like you overcame the addiction.
Yeah.
You were using that person to reaffirm your addiction to judgment or to resentment, right? Now, you overcome your emotional state, then you no longer respond in the same way because you've broken the addiction, right? So the person then has to really, really plan their behaviors. And they have to keep, and we do this in our events. When you lock into that elevated emotional state and you feel it and it's amazing, I make people bring it up, I don't know, hundreds of times. I want them to be able to bring it up so many times they can bring it up on their own when they're in traffic and say, I'd rather feel this way on the way to work than the other way.
So you go into work, your boss is a dick,
You're
and
right.
you can just bring up that transcendent state.
Be able to,
And through that, and you can ride out and overcome the old patterns of behavior that will bring you right back.
Sure. And that's not a linear process. I want to be really clear.
Sure.
I mean, as I said earlier, you got to keep.
That's not a 7-day process.
No, that's not a 7-day process. But when people retreat from their lives for 7 days and they remove themselves from the same people and the same place and the objects and things, and they're retreating to invest in themselves and to change and get renewed, they're doing that so that when they walk out into their life, their knee jerks and their emotional responses and their habituations, they've for the most part overcome some of them, right? So now you get back into your life, every person, every object, everything, every place has a neurological network in your brain, okay?
Yeah.
If you're not getting up, being defined by a vision of the future, I guarantee you're going to default back to the memories of your past and you'll be predictable in your life. Because as you see the same people, you're going to see them through the neurological network that you've created from the past, which is a memory of them. You're going to see them through the past. That's what reality is for most people. And because you've experienced enough things with them, you're going to have an emotion that's associated with them, okay? So that if you're not being defined by a vision of the future, as you open your eyes and your senses plug you back into the three-dimensional world, see the same people, go to the same places, do the exact same thing, react and respond and think in the exact same ways, it's no longer that your personality is creating your personal reality.
Yeah.
Now your personal reality is controlling your personality. Your environment is controlling how you feel and think and then ultimately behave. So then to be greater than your environment is one of the things that we say
Greater than your environment.
the
That's
change
great.
is. You got to be able to think, act, and feel in the same conditions in a different way. And if your body has been emotionally addicted to the stress hormones and you've been habituated in getting up and running through the same routine for the last 15 years and you've lost your free will to a set of automatic programs, then to change is to be greater than the body, greater than its programmed habituation into a predictable future and its conditioned emotional states into the past. And so when we do the work, it really, you have to come up against your body. You got to come up against the anger and the frustration and the pain and the fear. And instead of getting up and saying, I quit, I can't meditate, this is too hard, you know, all of that people do. Let me get on my phone and scroll through TikTok. Instead of doing that, you're not going to do any of that. You're going to be curious on what's on the other side of that, right? So then when the person then all of a sudden realizes their body's getting agitated, their body's getting resentful, it's getting impatient, it's getting frustrated, and they're sitting in a meditation, instead of getting up and quitting, they learn the process of lowering the volume to that emotion and they settle the body down. They tell the body, you're no longer the mind, I'm the mind. And we tell them that is a victory. And then all of a sudden they start thinking, I got to go, I got to get up, I got to check my cell phone, and the body's programmed like this. And instead of getting up and doing that, they become conscious that they're doing that, and they settle their body back down into the present moment. And that's a victory. And you keep doing that,
Yeah.
like training an animal. Sooner or later, Rainn, it's going to acquiesce to a new mind. It's going to surrender to a new mind. And when that occurs, there's this huge liberation of energy, and the person's freed from the chains of the past, you know, the familiar past.
People can check out Source, the documentary. Obviously, your work, just fantastic. It's blowing my mind. We'll have links down below. But Dr. Joe, thanks for sharing this incredible story in this world of incredible possibilities.
No, thank you, Rainn. Thank you for what you're doing. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much. Dr. Joe and his team are going to make the Source the film available for free for 48 hours, starting on June 21st. Go to sourcethefilm.org. You can also buy it there to own it, and all proceeds are going to go to Inner Science Research Fund to, well, fund more research. So check out Source the Film.
You do that for 5 years now. Your body is on autopilot, and it's taking you into that predictable future. A predictable future is the known, right? You can predict a person's day by watching their last day,
Sure.
right? So now we lose that free will to a set of programs, and that predictable future is also the known. Okay, so if the familiar past is the known and the predictable future is the known, there's only one place where the unknown exists, and that's